Chapter 15. What was that noise? Kyoko Kitty instinctively stopped moving. She thought she'd heard a sound like a bell clanging, but when she listened attentively, the corridor was as still and as silent as ever. Did I imagine it? Usually, she would have stopped and investigated until she could tell for sure, but right now, she had something far more important to do, and so she took off quickly toward her destination. Kyoko walked briskly down a corridor of Hope's Peak Academy staff building, a place students are normally forbidden to enter. The sound of her footsteps echoed coldly through the dim corridor. There was no sign of people in the staff building this late at night. She hadn't passed anyone on the way here, and she most likely wouldn't pass anyone going forward. She reached her destination in no time at all. A plaque reading Headmaster's Office adorned the door in front of her eyes. Kyoko glared at it for a moment, and then pushed the door open without knocking. "You're already here. That was fast," said Jin Kitty, who was sitting at the desk deep inside the office. He was smiling. Kyoko surveyed the room quickly, as was her habit when entering an unfamiliar place. Her first and only impression was, it's dirty. Cardboard boxes and documents were piled everywhere without rhyme or reason. "I've been too busy since we moved here, so I haven't had time to put things in order," said Kitty, having noticed where Kyoko was looking. Nevertheless, Kyoko's reply was surly and indifferent. She moved straight on to the subject at hand, indicating no interest in small talk. "I just came from meeting a member of the steering committee, but someone got in our way." Kitty was about to say something in surprise, but Kyoko quickly continued as if to say it was not yet time for such a reaction. "He was killed, in front of my eyes." Killed? But his body disappeared soon after that. Disappeared? Despite only managing to repeat her words, Kitty's face grew deeply concerned. Nevertheless, Kyoko didn't seem to take notice and continued speaking in the same indifferent tone. "But don't you think that's strange? They killed him as if trying to show off in front of me, and then they took the body away, like they wanted to hide it. If they wanted to show off, what purpose does hiding the body serve? I have a bad feeling about this." Kyoko seemed to be getting more and more passionate as she went on, and spoke faster and faster. "Furthermore, didn't another committee member go missing yesterday? He may also be in danger. We should find a way to contact and warn him. Not just him, the whole committee is also... Wait a moment." Kitty couldn't take it anymore, and rose up from his chair. Are you sure he was dead?" Kyoko said nothing, but her grim face was all the answer he needed. Kitty felt an intense feeling of exhaustion taking over his body and sank back into his chair. Why would such a thing... He heard Kyoko letting out a slow, long sigh in response to his question. "I'm not sure about the hiding, but I have a guess as to why he was killed." You do?" Kitty slapped his hands on the desk and looked energized again. "Tell me, why?" Watching him, Kyoko felt a sense of disappointment washing over her. Her emotion was reflected in her eyes, which seemed to be asking why he couldn't even figure that out on his own. Worse, he didn't even notice that. "Please, tell me." Kyoko sighed another deep sigh and answered quietly. "Making that big of a show when killing someone can only mean it's a warning. And if that's the case, killing a member of the steering committee is surely in response to that incident." Jin Kitty gulped loudly. "So, you know about that already? About the worst largest incident in Hope's Peak Academy's history?" "To a certain extent." Contrasting Kyoko's calm answer, Kitty's face turned sour. "I see," he spat out and slowly leaned back into his chair. Then, after blinking several times in an attempt to regain his composure, he asked her another question. "Are you saying he was killed because we are covering up the existence of that incident?" "No, there's more to it than that." Kyoko shook her head lightly. "The steering committee hasn't just been covering up the existence of the incident. They've been hiding something else. Something important. I think that's why he was killed." Kitty's expression turned thoughtful in an instant. Then, he whispered quietly, "Perhaps Is it because the committee knows the identity of the culprit and are harboring them? Kyoko's eyebrows raised slightly in reaction. You know about that? For the first time since she entered the room, her eyes met Kitty-Gitty's. I never thought you knew about the culprit conspiracy. I didn't think you'd give me this job if you did, but I guess you're in on it after all. Her words carried a hint of anger. No, that's not it. Kitty-Gitty shook his head, flustered. I was never told about the culprit, or the plan to harbor them. The committee decided that all on their own. I didn't hear about it from them. I did my own little investigation. Kyoko's frown grew deeper. You did your own investigation? That's not strange, is it? Kitty-Gitty smiled a bitter smile. I can manage that much when my mind's on it. I mean, I do have the blood of a detective family running through my... Enough! Kyoko's voice suddenly rose. Kitty-Gitty raised his head in surprise and found her glaring at him. She wasn't even trying to hide the anger boiling up inside her, and it was reflected in her eyes. She wasn't angry at her employer or her headmaster. She was angry at her detested father. Don't even dare joking about that! And that's why... I'm sorry. He had no choice but to apologize. That was thoughtless of me. He bowed his head deeply. His circumstances didn't matter. His own feelings didn't matter. From her point of view, he was simply a man who abandoned his family. That much was unquestionable. He didn't want to make any excuses. It's not like he could anyway. But perhaps, someday, he could at least convey his own feelings to her. No, those are just selfish thoughts. Forget it. He raised his head at her voice. She was leaning on a bookshelf in the corner of the room, and her expression was back to its calm self. We've gotten off topic. Her voice was cool and composed. I'm sorry. You're right. He let out a deep sigh, but just as he was about to let his attention relax, two words assaulted him, as if in a surprise attack. They were cold, sharp words that seemed to pierce the air. It was Izuru Kamakura, wasn't it? Kitty-Gitty reacted instinctively. His eyes, his fingertips, his breath. Kyoko did not miss his reaction. So it was. His entire body was arrested by the look she gave him. He remembered that look. No, he couldn't just remember it. She had the eyes of a detective family. The eyes he hated and feared. The eyes that could pierce anyone's inner thoughts, creep through their mind, and leave nothing unrevealed. His own daughter giving him this awe-inspiring look. Kitty-Gitty's frown loosened, just a little. As expected from a heir to the Kitty-Gitty family. Such outstanding talent. Is something funny? Kyoko asked, watching his face, as if taking him to task. No, I was just admiring you. The smile hasn't left Kitty-Gitty's face. I instructed you to find Izuru Kamakura, and in such a short time, you have not only discovered the existence of the worst largest incident in Hope's Peak Academy's history, but also guessed correctly that Izuru Kamakura was responsible for it. That is amazing. You spoke fast, in excitement. Well then, how about you tell me the rest? Who is Izuru Kamakura? I can't even tell if it's a man or a woman by that name alone. Kitty-Gitty shook his head. I told you before. I can't tell you that. The smile disappeared from his face. I see. Fine then. Kyoko was quickly getting ready to leave, as if to say she'd find out herself regardless. She looked at her feet and continued in her disinterested tone. But I don't understand that at all. Why would you ask me to find Kamakura for you if you know he's the culprit? Aren't you trying to cover up this incident? If so, you should just let the committee shelter Kamakura and do nothing. No, I can't just leave it up to them. Oh? Kitty-Gitty's mouth twisted unnaturally. So you don't trust them either? No, that's not it. Kitty-Gitty's voice turned cold. It's just that I don't think they know what they're doing. I think they're making a big mistake. A mistake? They think that if they can cover up this incident, it's all over. But I don't think that's true. Kyoko listened carefully to Kitty Gitty's explanation without interjecting. That incident is not over. I feel like something is still going on somewhere out there. I hope it's just my imagination, but if it isn't, this may turn into something we can't undo. That's why I must hear what Izuru Kamakura has to say. But the committee isn't revealing where Kamakura is. They don't trust me. Something bothered Kyoko. It had less to do with what he was saying, and more with his demeanor as he was telling her about his fear that the incident was far from over. His tone of voice and gestures were certainly grave, but that was not all. She felt just a tiny hint of a different emotion hidden in them. She suddenly remembered her grandfather. Kyoko's grandfather, Jin Kirigiri's father, was still the head of the Kirigiri family, on active duty as a detective. She remembered her first accomplishment as a detective. She was officially acting as an assistant on the case, but was successful beyond anyone's imagination. Her grandfather, being her guardian at the time, had been observing her closely. She remembered him narrowing his eyes without saying a word, the expression on his face going far beyond simple joy or excitement. She thought her father's expression now resembled her grandfather's expression then, but she didn't dare say a word. It would be an insult to her grandfather, who she revered. Is something wrong? The question made her realize she had been quiet for a while. It's nothing. Kyoko pulled herself together, softly brushing away a strand of hair. Fine. I understand why you asked me to search for Kamakura now. In short, you couldn't do it yourself without drawing the committee's attention. Then, she pointed her piercing eyes towards Kitty Gitty again. But are you sure it was a good idea to confide in me? Kitty Gitty's expression turned worried. What do you mean? I told you from the very beginning, didn't I? The steering committee is being targeted because they're sheltering the incident's culprit, which means the culprit is someone who is searching for Kamakura. Kitty Gitty suddenly realized what he was saying, and a stiff smile appeared on his face. In that case, what you're trying to say is that I am a suspect. That's right, although I already know it's not you. Kyoko folded her arms in front of her chest. Right after the body disappeared, I made a phone call to this room. You answered straight away, so unfortunately, you have an alibi. Unfortunately, that's a bit much, isn't it? Kitty Gitty's stiff smile turned into a bitter one. Furthermore, don't you have other reasons to worry? When I find Izuru Kamakura, what if I decide to call the police before coming to you? No, I'm not worried about that at all. Kitty Gitty answered, as if mocking the suggestion. Much as the law is important to the police, the most important thing to a detective is the client. As long as you are a super high school level detective, you will not break our deal. Even if you really detest your employer, he thought to himself. Is that why you hired me? You thought it would be bad if I came sniffing about the incident on my own, so you thought you'd keep me quiet by giving me a job? Her words were tinted with emotion. Kyoko herself felt that. She immediately regretted saying them. If that's what my words implied, I apologize. The only reason I hired you is because I need your talent. I had no ulterior motives. He chose his words carefully. It was clear that he was worried, and that made Kyoko even angrier. She was also mad at herself for letting him get to her. She had thought she had put it all behind her. She wasn't supposed to feel anything for her father anymore. She wasn't even supposed to resent him. That's why she accepted the job. It was supposed to be just like any other case. So why was she choosing such sharp words every time she spoke? It was like, I'm a spoiled child, looking for attention. I've had enough of this idle chatter, she said in a strained voice, trying to rid the thought from her head. In any case, we can't have any more victims. I think it's a good idea for you to warn the rest of the committee members. Tell them if they continue to harbor Izuru Kamakura, it's likely more people are going to end up dead. Yes, of course. They both knew the committee were unlikely to listen, but neither of them said it out loud. They both knew it would be useless to mention it. I'll be going now. Kyoko turned her back on Kitty Gitty without giving him another look. She was on her way to the door when an unexpected voice came from behind her back. This job turned out much more dangerous than I imagined. Kyoko stopped in her tracks. So? She turned her head back. I am a detective, heir to the Kirigiri family. I thought that's what you'd say. Kyoko sensed those words were leading to another unwanted emotion, and started moving quickly to the door again. When she reached for the doorknob, her father spoke again behind her. The preparatory school's parade is growing more radical by the day. His voice was unusually tense. I feel the timing is too perfect. It can't be unrelated to that incident. What I'm trying to say is... Kirigiri cleared his throat and changed to a natural tone of voice. Be careful. He sounded like a father talking to his daughter before she went out for the evening. Nevertheless, Kyoko's reaction was a blunt one. That is to say, she didn't react at all. She just kept silent as she left the headmaster's office. After hearing the door close loudly, Kirigiri let out a deep sigh and leaned back into his chair, but his face showed a hint of a smile. That is truly one incredible talent she has. He whispered those words inside his heart, and the smile on his face grew wider. After leaving the headmaster's office, Kyoko walked back through the corridors as fast as when she arrived. Her face was emotionless. Then, without changing her expression, she suddenly whispered, You didn't have to say that. I know already. The whisper only she herself could hear soon vanished into the air, and then she herself vanished too, deep into the dark corridors.